Sukadev Goswami and Srila Prabhupada are continuing to give us advice about the benefits of poverty. And finally, after their instructions, we'll hear the continuation of the Leela of when Krishna decides to pull down the 2 Arjun trees. This is chapter 10 of Srimad Bhagavatam 10 and Krishna book, side by side.
A poverty-stricken man must automatically undergo austerities and penances because he does not have the wealth to possess anything. Thus his false prestige is vanquished. Always in need of food, shelter and clothing, he must be satisfied with what is obtained by the mercy of Providence. Undergoing such compulsory austerities is good for him because this purifies him and completely frees him from false ego. Srimad Bhagavatam 10.10.15.
Now this is a picture of Srila Sanatana Goswami after he's escaped from the prison and come finally to meet Lord Chaitanya. His brother-in-law gave him a very fine chadar, very high-class, expensive chadar. And in that chadar he met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So that chadar became a point of contention, because if one renounces, then they should live very simply. So when Sanatana Goswami understood that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't approve that he was wearing something of such great value, although he had renounced everything, he took that chadar and he went down to the bank of the river and he exchanged it with a torn quilt of another mendicant, and gave that fine chadar to the mendicant, and then came back and Lord Chaitanya was pleased. So sometimes a person is forced into poverty due to past deeds, and other times poverty is voluntarily accepted. And then other times poverty is blessed by the Supreme Lord himself upon his devotee, because he describes also later in the 10th canto that when he's pleased with someone, he takes everything away from them, so they have no other shelter but his lotus feet. And then when he feels confident that a person will not misuse anything, then he gives everything back manifold over.
A saintly person voluntarily accepts a state of poverty just to become free from material false prestige. Many great kings left their princely standard of living and went to the forest to practice austerity according to Vedic culture, just to become purified. But if one who cannot voluntarily accept such austerity is put into a situation of poverty, he automatically must practice austerity. Austerity is good for everyone because it frees one from material conditions. Therefore, if one is very much proud of his material position, putting him into poverty is the best way to rectify his foolishness. Daridra dosho gunarashi nashi. When a person is poverty-stricken, naturally his false pride in aristocracy, wealth, education and beauty is smashed. Thus corrected, he is in the right position for liberation. Purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 10.10.15.
So Srila Prabhupada also gives the example of his own life when his spiritual master appeared twice in a dream telling him to take sannyas. He was thinking, horrible. How can I give up the family? I have so many responsibilities. But he was forced to, because the instruction of the spiritual master becomes the life and soul of the disciple. So in order to carry out that instruction, the Supreme Lord forced him to give up everything. Otherwise, how could he carry out that instruction? So the other example here is Raghunath Das Goswami. He came from such a wealthy Majumdar family. He was the only son. They tried to keep him bound up. They had 10 chowkidars watching him inside and outside of the house. And by the mercy finally of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu, he escaped and walked to Puri. When his father found out, his father sent 2 men to serve him and money. And Raghunath used to use that money to give a nice prasadam feast for all the devotees and invite Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But then he realized that if I continue living like this isn't the way a renounced person lives. So he sent the men back and he refused the money. And then he used to just beg at the gate of Jagannath's temple, whatever Mahaprasadam people would give. Then he realized, I'm behaving just like a prostitute. I'm thinking maybe this person will give me today, there's another person who gave me yesterday. So then he gave up that procedure too. And finally, in total abject poverty, which was self-inflicted, he would just take the rice that was rejected by the cows, wash that rice, and eat that. And when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu found out, he put a little salt. He insisted that Raghunath Das, he said, you've been feasting and you haven't invited me? And he forcibly took some of that rice and ate it. So this is voluntarily giving up all of the trappings of material life, position, aristocracy, wealth, education, and accepting a poverty-stricken situation so that one can simply depend on the mercy of the Lord.
Always hungry, longing for sufficient food, a poverty-stricken man gradually becomes weaker and weaker. Having no extra potency, his senses are automatically pacified. A poverty-stricken man, therefore, is unable to perform harmful, envious activities. In other words, such a man automatically gains the result of austerities and penances adopted voluntarily by saintly persons. Srimad Bhagavatam 10:10-16.
So poverty also can come in the form of disease. There was the son-in-law of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. His name was Amoga. He was a Brahmin. But he was very envious, extremely offensive, and he was always looking for a way to criticize Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So one day, while Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was taking prasadam at Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's house, he entered and began to criticize the Supreme Lord. And Sarvabhauma drove him away with a stick and cursed him to die because of his offense. He prayed, his wife prayed that her own daughter become a widow. So Amoga, he quickly became stricken with cholera. A disease makes a person completely poverty-stricken. They can't eat, they can't utilize their senses, and they become completely incapable of functioning. He was on his deathbed. So when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu heard that, he came to deliver Amoga. And by the grace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Amoga, he began chanting the holy name of the Lord and began slapping himself for his offenses. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had to stop him. So in situations such as sickness, poverty, when everything's taken away from us and we have no facility for utilizing our senses for sense gratification, then we can remember the Supreme Lord and depend on His mercy.
According to the opinion of experienced medical practitioners, diabetes is a result of voracious eating, and tuberculosis is a disease of undereating. We should desire neither to be diabetic nor to be tubercular. Yavadartha prayojanam. We should eat frugally and keep the body fit for advancing in Krishna consciousness. As recommended elsewhere in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.10, Kamasya nendriya pritir labho jiveta yavata jivasya tattva jitnyasa nartho yascheha karmavihi. Purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 10:10-16. Life's desires should never be directed toward sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life or self-preservation. Since a human being is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth, nothing else should be the goal of one's work. Srimad Bhagavatam 1:2-10.
So Prabhupada very early introduced the prasadam schedule for the devotees. And Prabhupada himself used to personally follow that. Every day he would have rice, dal, chapati and sabji. A little bit of milk, a little bit of sweets, a little bit of fruit. But rice, dal, chapati and sabji was Prabhupada's diet. That's the way Krishna eats, and that's the way his devotees eat. And if Prabhupada would, if devotees would serve him the wrong things, too many sweets, too many fried things, Prabhupada would fall ill. And when he would fall ill, then he couldn't continue with his translating and his other work that was so important for the mission. So we could very easily see that by eating very simply and following a very regulated diet as Prabhupada did, without deviating, then you can get so much accomplished in pushing on Krishna consciousness. So we have to be very careful both not to overeat nor to undereat. Prabhupada explained that the medicine is the holy name, chanting Hare Krishna, and the diet is taking Krishna prasadam. And if you only take the medicine but don't follow the diet, there's a chance you won't get better. And if you only follow the diet and don't take the medicine, also, you might not become free from the disease. So our disease is bhava rog, that's this disease of material attachment, and therefore we have to both take the medicine and follow the diet.
The real business of human being, the real business of human life is to keep oneself fit for advancement in spiritual realization. Human life is not meant for making the senses unnecessarily strong so that one suffers from disease and one increases in an envious fighting spirit. In this age of Kali, however, human civilization is so misled that people are unnecessarily increasing in economic development, and as a result they are opening more and more slaughterhouses, liquor shops and brothels. In this way the whole civilization is being spoiled. Purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 10:10-16.
So the Vedic civilization that Prabhupada was teaching us, coming through the disciplic succession, is simple living and high thinking. And simple living also means eating simply, because if we can control the tongue, then the whole line, the tongue, the belly and the genitals are automatically controlled. So we control the tongue by eating Krishna prasadam, and even with Krishna prasadam, we have to be very cautious that we offer Krishna what he eats and not what we want to eat, because that's another form of sense gratification. Prabhupada gave us the diet with what Krishna eats. When we opened the temple here, he wrote down the daily schedule of what we should feed Krishna, and these are all very healthy, nutritious foodstuffs that a young boy, Krishna and Balaram, they're growing, so they have to eat very nicely. And if we take that Krishna prasadam, he also made a rule here previously that anything cooked by the devotees has to be offered to the deities. And previously, even as grihastas, when we had to cook something in the house, let's say someone was sick, we would bring that to the deity kitchen, and that would also be offered to the deities. So the first principle is everything has to be offered to Krishna. And the second principle is whatever we do offer, we should be very careful that it's simple, sattvic, nutritious, and not simply to increase our sense gratification.
This Photoshop image? This is Photoshop image?
No, I can't like this.
Oh, really? Another advantage of poverty is that a saintly person can easily enter a poor man's house, and thus the poor man can take advantage of the saintly person's association. Krishna Book, Chapter 10. Saintly persons may freely associate with those who are poverty-stricken, but not with those who are rich. A poverty-stricken man, by association with saintly persons, very soon becomes uninterested in material desires, and the dirty things within the core of his heart are cleansed away. Srimad Bhagavatam 10:10-17.
The Sanatana Goswami was the perfect example of a saintly person who was able to mingle freely with both the Dhira and the Adhira. Dhira Dhira Jana Priya Priyakaro Nirmatsaro Pujito. So both the Dhira and the Adhira took shelter of Sanatana Goswami because he was always wandering in Braj. He would live under different trees. Sometimes he would stay at the foot of Nandagram, sometimes he would be here, different places, sometimes at Govardhan. And even the simple villagers, because they understood that he was near Matsara, completely free of envy. They would bring all their problems to him for him to solve. Even their family problems they would bring to him, because they knew that he was saintly and he would only give them the correct advice. So this is the way a saintly person, because of his humility and his complete freedom from enviousness, anyone can take shelter of him. So Sanatana Goswami also, because he only lived by Madhukari, therefore his senses were completely under control.
A very opulent man does not allow anyone to enter his house. Therefore, the saintly person cannot enter. According to Vedic system, a saintly person takes the position of a mendicant so that on the plea of begging something from the householder, he can enter any house. The householder who has usually forgotten everything about spiritual advancement because he is busy maintaining family affairs can be benefited by the association of saintly persons. There is a great chance for the poor man to become liberated through association with a saint. Of what use are persons who are puffed up with material opulences and prestige if they are bereft of the association of saintly persons and devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Krishna Book, Chapter 10.
So previously in Vrindavan, we know that Prabhupada has said there are approximately 5,000 temples here in Vrindavan. And many years ago, there were no electronics here in Vrindavan whatsoever. And then gradually, the television entered the holy Dham. And there was one television man. And I asked him one day, in Vrindavan, how many televisions are there now? He said, oh, there are about 5,000 televisions. So Giriraj Swami, he once gave a very interesting lecture of this evolution of the television in Vrindavan. And not only in Vrindavan, in India, because he preached in Bombay. That before, when he used to go for preaching, he could go to anyone's house and they would invite him in as a saintly person and he would be able to preach to them. And then when the television appeared, he would come to the door and they would just open the door a little bit and tell him he had to be very quiet because the television was playing. And then they would let him in. And then gradually, because of the advancement of technology, when he would knock on the door, they wouldn't even answer anymore. So this is what happens. Because of the material advancement, we're not giving these saintly persons an opportunity to enter our house anymore. And in the West, particularly now also here in India, they have watchdogs, very ferocious dogs, who stand at the gate. And if anyone even attempts to enter, they're ready to kill that person. They're so protective of their master. Even the postman can't enter. So this is another form of enviousness. They don't want to associate with the saintly persons. Therefore, they keep the dog at the door.
A poor man receives sadhus very quickly, offers them obeisances and tries to take advantage of their presence, whereas a rich man keeps a big greyhound dog at his door so that no one can enter his house. He posts a sign saying, "Beware of dog," and avoids the association of saintly persons, whereas a poor man keeps his door open for them and thus benefits by their association more than a rich man does. Purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 10:10-17. It is said, Mahad Vichalanam Drunam Gruhinam Dina Chetasam, Srimad Bhagavatam 10:4. The only business of a saintly person or sannyasi, a person in a renounced order, is
preach Krishna consciousness. Sadhus, saintly persons, want to preach to both the poor and the rich, but the poor take more advantage of the sadhus preaching than the rich do.
So when Maharaj Prataparudra, who was the king of Orissa, heard that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had returned from his preaching tour all over India, he was in Cuttack, and he immediately came because he wanted to take darshan of the Lord. But the Lord refused to see him because he was a king. And a king means worldly opulence, association with women, and sense gratification. So as much as the devotees implored him, he even threatened to leave Jagannath Puri if they asked him anymore to meet the king. So finally, in desperation, the king gave up all of his worldly opulence and became just like a mendicant and approached the Lord's lotus feet and pleased him by massaging his feet and singing the Gopi Geet prayers to him. So even if one is in an opulent situation, they should voluntarily give that up in order to get the association of saintly persons.
Because Narada Muni in his previous life was the poverty-stricken son of a maid-servant. He got the association of saintly persons and later became the exalted Narada Muni. This was his actual experience. Therefore, he is now comparing the position of a poor man with that of a rich man. Satam prasangat mama virya samvido bhavanti hridkarna rasayana katha tajjoshanadashu apavarga vartmani shraddha ratir bhaktir anukramishati. Srimad Bhagavatam 3:25-25. If one gets the advantage of association with saintly persons, by their instructions one becomes more and more purified of material desires. Purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 10:10-17. In the association of pure devotees, discussion of the pastimes and activities of Supreme Personality of Godhead is very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and the heart. By cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation, and thereafter he is freed and his attraction becomes fixed. Then real devotion and devotional service begins. Srimad Bhagavatam 3:25-25.
That's why Shravanam is the first of the 9 different processes of devotional service, because our faith is increased by hearing. And this path of Appavarga means liberation. Pa, in the Sanskrit alphabet, the Pa Varga has 5 letters. Pa, Pa, Ba, Pa, and Ma. Pa stands for parishram, working hard for sense gratification. And we work so hard that Pa, fena comes on our mouth, just like when a horse has to work so hard. Then, Ba, we realize that even after working so hard for sense gratification, we don't get any satisfaction. So it's Vipal. Vipal means useless, no fruit whatsoever, even with our hard work. And then comes Bha, Bhai, fear. We worked so hard our whole life with no fruits, no results, and we know death is coming, and we're afraid of death, which is Ma, Mrityu. So this Pa-varga means the material world, and Appa-varga, that path of liberation, can only be attained by hearing of the pastimes and activities of the Supreme Lord from the devotees.
Krishna.
This sloka that Srila Prabhupada quoted was spoken by Kapila Dev to his mother Devahuti. Devahuti, she was a princess, very aristocratic, the daughter of Swayambhuva Manu. She gave up everything to serve her husband Kardama Muni. And then when her son was born, who was an expansion of the Supreme Lord, she took instruction from him. And this is how he guided her.
Krishna bahirmukha haya bhogavancha kare nikatastha maya tare japatiya dhare. Prema Vivartha. Material life means one forgets Krishna and that one increases in one's desires for sense gratification. But if one receives an advantage of instructions from saintly persons and forgets the importance of material desires, one is automatically purified. Cheto darpanam arjanam bhava mahadavagni nirvapanam. Chaitanya Charitamrita Antya 2012, Shikshashtakam verse number 1. Unless the core of materialistic person's heart is purified, he cannot get rid of the pangs of Bhava Mahadavagni, the blazing fire of material existence. Purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 10:10-17. From Jagadananda Pandit's Prem Vivarta, turning his face away from Krishna, the Jiva develops the desire to enjoy. Standing nearby, Maya slaps him and seizes hold of him.
So there's a devotee now in our community. His name is Anadi Krishna Das. He's come from New Vrindavan. And he has a disease called it's lateral sclerosis. And that means gradually, he loses all control of his muscular activities in his body. When he came here, he was quite fit. He could talk. He could move. Now he's in a condition where the advancement of the disease has caused that he can hardly talk, eat, move. Everything has to be done for him. The complete loss of muscular capability is being lost in his body. But he's still fully conscious, Krishna conscious. So yesterday, because we're starting this 2-week strict lockdown again, he came for the last time to the temple. And I was glorifying how fortunate he was that he's here in Vrindavan. He can go back to Krishna directly upon leaving this miserable body. And tears came to his eyes. And he said, but what about my material desires? So we have to hear about Krishna. By hearing about Krishna, then we develop a strong taste to associate with Krishna. Without that hearing, the material desires, just standing nearby him, Maya slaps him and seizes hold of him. So we have to take shelter of the association of the pure devotees. We have to hear from them and become completely absorbed in the pastimes of the Lord. If we want to cross over this material world, give up our material desires and go back to Krishna. So this is why Narada Muni is constantly traveling and looking for people that he can liberate.
Saintly persons, sadhus, think of Krishna 24 hours a day. They have no other interest. Why should people neglect the association of such exalted spiritual personalities and try to associate with materialists? Taking shelter of non-devotees, most of whom are proud and rich. Srimad Bhagavatam 10:10-18. A sadhu is one who is engaged in devotional service to the Lord without deviation. Bhajate mam ananya bhak. Titikshavaha karunikaha surdah sarvadehinam ajata shatravaha shantaha sadhavaha sadhubhushanaha. The symptoms of a sadhu are that he is tolerant, merciful and friendly to all living entities. He has no enemies, he is peaceful, he abides by the scriptures, and all his characteristics are sublime. Srimad Bhagavatam 3:25-21. Purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 10:10-18.
So again, Srila Prabhupada is quoting one of the valuable verses spoken by Kapila Dev to his mother. These are the ornaments of a sadhu. They are tolerance, mercy, tolerant, merciful, friendly to all living entities. He has no enemies. He is peaceful, and he abides by the scriptures. Now, Kapila Dev, after he left his mother, he went to the delta of the Ganga Sagar, and he was meditating there. And the sons of Sagar Maharaj, they were looking for the horse that was sent out for the Ashvamedha Yagya. and that horse had wandered to the ashram of Kapila Dev. And when they saw the horse, they very aggressively threatened Kapila Dev and accused him of stealing their horse. Now, even though Kapila Dev was the topmost of all sadhus with all of these ornaments, just looking at them, they all burnt to ashes. So, a sadhu has two sides, razor sharp, can be like a thunderbolt and can be soft as a rose. So these envious and arrogant young sons of Sagar were all burnt to ashes. But then when the descendant came, Anshuman, he came and very humbly offered his respects to Kapila Dev. Kapila Dev blessed him and told him how he could free his ancestors from the sinful reaction of being burnt to ashes like that by him, by bringing the Ganga. So association with the sadhu can go two ways, just as we're seeing here in this Leela. Narada Muni, he'll curse Nalakavera and Manigriva, but that curse at the same time is a blessing.
A sadhu is Surudaha Sarvadehina, the friend of everyone. Why then should the rich, instead of associating with sadhus, waste their valuable time in association with other rich men who are averse to spiritual life? Both the poor man and the rich man can take advantage of Krishna consciousness movement, and here it is advised that everyone do so. There is no profit in avoiding the association of the members of Krishna consciousness movement. Narottam Das Thakur has said, Satsanga chhadi kainu asate vilasa te karane lagi laje karma bandha phasa. Purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 10:10-18. I gave up the association of devotees to enjoy sense gratification in the association of common nonsense men, and immediately Maya caught me and entangled me in the web of fruitive activities. I have always drunk the most dangerous poison of sense gratification, and therefore I could not merge myself into the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya. Why am I living? What is my happiness? Why did Narottam Das not die long, long ago?
So sometimes when we come to Krishna consciousness, in the very beginning, because we're picking up where we left off from our previous life, it's all ecstasy. We're so happy, we're dancing, we're chanting, we're enjoying prasadam, because we've been suffering in between from our previous life where we took birth now. Now we meet the devotees, we're with them in ecstasy, and then that ecstasy starts to wear off. Why does it wear off? Because we still have material desires in our heart. And then sometimes we think that, well, if I enter Grihastha ashram, then I'll be able to do both things. I can fulfill my material desires and at the same time be Krishna conscious. And this detour, sometimes we think, all right, as a Grihastha, I'll work for Krishna. I'll work for Krishna, I'll give the fruits to Krishna, I'll maintain my family, everything will be fine. But that balance is very difficult to maintain. So we're thinking we're working for Krishna, but it turns out we're just work. And we forget about Krishna. And most of our thoughts are, how am I going to maintain my family? So Srila Prabhupada, even for Grihastas, he gave a wonderful formula how we can support the family and at the same time stay in that fire of ecstasy in Krishna consciousness. And that is, he said that the Grihastas can engage in book distribution. They could take the books at concessional rates, they distribute these books, and that profit can be used to maintain their family. So this is how Prabhupada recommended. He said there are three classes of Grihastas. One is first class. That's when they live separately in the temple. The husband and wife do not live together in the temple. The men live with the men, the women live with the women, and they serve the deities in the temple. That's first class Grihastha. Second class Grihastha is they live outside of the temple together, but they come every day to the temple and engage in service in the temple. And third class is when they live outside of the temple, they have deities in their home, and they do their deity worship in their house, and they're not engaged in the temple service. So we can choose. No one is forced. This is voluntary. Which type of devotee do we want to be? If we want to be a first-class grihasta, that opportunity is there for us. That way we can engage in Sankirtan movement and at the same time maintain our family and get what we need, so far as money is concerned, by book distribution.
Just one question.
Yes?
By first class, second class, we are just meaning 3 different categories, right?
Yeah,
Or there are gradations?
Yes. The best type of grihasta, the best type of grihasta life is when husband and wife live separately and they're serving in the temple. If they can't do that, then they move out and then they come every day to serve in the temple if they want to live together. They can't live together in the temple. And then third class is when they make their own home into a temple and they're not engaged in temple services.
If we give up the association of sadhus, saintly persons engaged in Krishna consciousness, and associate with persons seeking sense gratification and accumulating wealth for this purpose, our life is spoiled. The word asat refers to an avaishnava, one who is not a devotee of Krishna, and sat refers to a Vaishnava, Krishna's devotee. One should always seek the association of Vaishnavas and not spoil one's life by mixing with Avaishnavas. In Bhagavad-Gita 7.15, the distinction between Vaishnava and Avaishnava is enunciated. Purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 10.10.18. Next.
So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, although he was a Supreme Lord, playing the role of a devotee, the topmost devotee, he would seek the association of the Vaishnavas. Every day he would go for darshan to the Jagannath temple, and on his way to take his bath at the ocean, he would go to visit Haridas Thakur. Now, Haridas Thakur, he stayed away from the temple because of his birth. He felt that even if the Brahmins on their way to the temple to do their service see him, they might get contaminated. So he would only take darshan of the chakra on top of the temple. And also Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami, in their humility, although they were born as Brahmins, they stayed with Haridas Thakur whenever they came to Puri for the same reason. Because they had associated with the Muslim government, they felt that they were unfit and not pure enough to visit the temple. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Supreme Lord himself, would come to visit them every day. So that's the example that he set, that these Vaishnavas are so valuable that even the Lord himself would come to take their darshan.
Namam dushkritino mudha prapadyante naradhavaha mayaya aparuta jnana asuram bhavam ashritaha. Anyone who is not surrendered to Krishna is a most sinful person, dushkriti, a rascal, mudha, and the lowest of men, naradhama. Therefore, one should not avoid the association of Vaishnavas, which is now available all over the world in the form of Krishna consciousness movement. Purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 10.10.18.
So in the beginning of the Krishna consciousness movement, Prabhupada gave a lot of emphasis on Harinam Nagar Sankirtan. And every day big parties would go out from the temples to invite people to come to the temple for the Sunday love feast, for the Bhagavad-Gita classes. And that way the Krishna consciousness movement spread like wildfire all over the world. Then Prabhupada put more emphasis on book distribution, because in the beginning we chant Hare Krishna and we take prasadam, but then there's a whole philosophy. So one should understand the philosophy very clearly. So if we want to advance in spiritual life, we should seek the association of devotees and not be in this category of the 4 different types of asuras who never surrender. Namam, prabadyante. They never surrender to me. And those are the mudhas, the people who work hard simply for sense gratification, the naradamas, the maya prakrita jnanas, one whose knowledge has been stolen by maya, and the outright asuras.
The great sage Narada thereafter thought that it was his duty to put those demigods into a condition where they could not be falsely proud of their material opulence and prestige. Narada was compassionate and wanted to save them from their fallen life. They were in the mode of darkness, and being therefore unable to control their senses, they were addicted to sex life. It was the duty of a saintly person like Narada to save them from their abominable condition. Krishna Book, Chapter 10. Therefore, since these two persons drunk with the liquor named Varuni or Madhavi and unable to control their senses, have been blinded by the pride of celestial opulence and have become attached to women, I shall relieve them of their false prestige. Srimad Bhagavatam 10:10-19.
So Narada Muni, having also been in a similar situation 2 births previously, he understood the value of the so-called curses or benedictions of people, and in that case it was the Prajapatis, who cursed him to become a Sudra and lose all of his opulence as a Gandharva. So he knew the system worked, and therefore to save these 2 highly elevated individuals who were misusing all of the opulence and all of the facilities given to them in the heavenly planets for sense gratification, he decided to remove all of that from them and make them poverty-stricken in the form of trees.
When a sadhu chastises or punishes someone, he does not do so for revenge. Maharaj Parikshit had inquired why Narada Muni was subject to such a spirit of revenge, tamaha. But this was not tamaha for Narada Muni. In full knowledge of what was for the good of the 2 brothers, wisely thought of how to cure them. Vaishnavas are good physicians. They know how to protect the person from material disease. Thus they are never in tamoguna. Saguna samatitetan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Bhagavad-Gita 14:26. Vaishnavas are always situated on the transcendental platform, the Brahman platform. They cannot be subject to mistakes or the influence of the modes of nature. Whatever they do after full consideration is meant just to lead everyone back home, back to Godhead. Purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 10:10-19. One who engages in full devotional service, unfailing in all circumstances, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman.
So this was Narada Muni now in this birth, fully dedicated to preaching the glories of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So there's a little story. Narada Muni was traveling once, and he came to the home of one gentleman named Maya Shankar. And he encouraged him, "You're old enough now, your family is settled, you come now with me, engage in Krishna's service." And Maya Shankar told him, "I just have a few more things to do, and then I promise you, I'll come and join you." So after some time, Narada Muni came back to Maya Shankar's house, and he couldn't find him anywhere. So he asked the family members, "Where did he go?" He said, "Oh, he died." And then he noticed there was a little dog at the front of the house barking, and he could understand that this was Maya Shankar. So Maya Shankar, he was so attached to his family and so attached to his house, he had taken birth as a dog. So Narada Muni said, "You see what's happened to you now? You wasted your life, now you're a dog." And Maya Shankar, he replied to him, "I still have some work to do. I have to protect the family. After this lifetime, I promise I'll come with you." So again, after some time, Narada Muni came, and the dog wasn't there anymore. And he asked the family members, "What happened to the dog?" "Oh, the dog died." So then he looked around the house and he saw one chipkali, what are they called? Lizard on the wall. Maya Shankar. Now look what happened to you. You become a lizard in your house. Yes, and this is the best birth, Maya Shankar told Narada Muni, because now I just have to go tick, 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 and all of my daughter-in-laws, everyone in the family listens to me because of their superstitions, you know. So this is what happens when we become too attached to our family and our home. Sometimes Prabhupada explains we take birth as crickets and cockroaches in the same home because we're so attached to our house. We can become dogs to become a watchdog. We can become lizards in our own house. There's no guarantee that just because we have a nice house, a nice family, next birth we're going to be a human. We can become anything in that house because of our attachments.
In animal life, the animal has no sense to understand that he is naked. But Kuvera was the treasurer of demigods, a very responsible man, and Nalakuvara and Manigriva were two of his sons, and yet they became so animalistic and irresponsible that they could not understand due to intoxication that they were naked. To cover the lower part of body is a principle of human civilization, and when a man or woman forgets this principle, they become degraded. Narada therefore thought that the best punishment for them was to make them immovable living entities or trees. Krishna Book, chapter 10.
So who knows how many pious activities Nalakuvara and Manigriva must have performed to become the sons of the treasurer of the demigods. Such a wealthy aristocratic position. And here they were wasting their life in sense gratification, intoxication, and illicit sex. So Narada Muni, out of his great mercy, gave this curse to them, not out of enviousness. This is why Parikshit Maharaj asked that question at the beginning of the chapter, that how could he have cursed these two young men? It wasn't out of envy. It was out of compassion for them, so they would have time to think about their misdeeds and redirect their life to the real goal of life, which is devotional service to Krishna.
Trees are by nature's laws immovable. Although trees are covered by the modes of ignorance, they cannot do harm. The great sage Narada thought it befitting that although the brothers by his mercy would be punished to become trees, they continue to keep their memory to be able to know why they were being punished. After changing the body, a living entity generally forgets his previous life, but in special cases, by the grace of the Lord, as with Nalakuvar and Manigriva, one can remember. Sage Narada therefore contemplated that the two demigods should remain for 100 years in the time of demigods, in the form of trees, and after that they would be fortunate enough to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face by His causeless mercy, and thus they would be again promoted to the life of the demigods and great devotees of the Lord. Krishna Book, chapter 10.
So, from the pictures in the Bhagavad-Gita, we learn that when one is fond of being naked, they take birth as trees. So sometimes when we go to preach in the West, there's so many trees and not so many people because of their impious activities. So many living entities have to take birth as trees. So Radha Govinda Maharaj, he was once giving a class about this. And he explained that there was once a person, he very much wanted to go to America. And he did everything possible to go to America, whatever it took. And that doesn't mean all good things either. Sometimes you have to lie and cheat and make false papers and whatever it is to try to get that visa for America. But unfortunately, he met with death. And at the time of death, he was taken to the court of Yamaraj, and Chitragupta, he read off to Yamaraj all of the sins this man had committed. And it was decided that next lifetime, he was going to have to take birth as a tree. So the man begged Yamaraj that, all right, I have to take birth as a tree, but at least let me be a tree in America. So this is the foolishness. We don't understand. Unless we stick to Krishna consciousness and give up the four abominable mahapaps, there's no question of advancement in life. So these two wayward sons of Kuvera, they had given up saintly life of the demigods, because demigods are also devotees. They're devotees with material desires, and Krishna gives them the facility to execute their material desires within the scope of Krishna consciousness. But these boys had gone beyond that. So Narada Muni, he was giving them a little punishment so they would come back again on the path of Krishna consciousness.
These two young men, Nalakuvar and Manigriv, are by fortune the sons of the great demigod Kuvera. But because of false prestige and madness after drinking liquor, they are so fallen that they are naked but cannot understand that they are. Therefore, because they are living like trees, but trees are naked but are not conscious, these two young men should receive the bodies of trees. This will be proper punishment. Nonetheless, after they become trees and until they are released, by my mercy they will have remembrance of their past sinful activities. Moreover, by my special favor, after the expiry of 100 years by the measurement of the demigods, they will be able to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vasudeva face to face and thus revive their real position as devotees. Srimad Bhagavatam 10:10, 20-22.
So personally, Manigriva and Nalakuvera did nothing in their life to acquire the great boon of getting the direct face-to-face darshan of Sri Krishna. There were no pious activities in their life at that time, only sinful activities, naked, unconscious from intoxication. But Narada Muni, being a pure devotee, he had the power to correct these two wayward demigods and give them the opportunity to get direct darshan of the Supreme Lord. So that is the special mercy of a pure devotee. And Srila Prabhupada also, again and again, he explains to us, you can talk to Krishna, you can dance with him, you can eat with him, everything you can do directly with Krishna. Simply become Krishna conscious. So if we follow Prabhupada's instructions and give up these four sinful activities and stay within the process of Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada also gives us that guarantee that we can meet Krishna face to face and dance with him and eat with him and talk with him and play with him.
A tree has no consciousness. When cut, it feels no pain. But Narada Muni wanted the consciousness of Nalakuvar and Manigriv to continue, so that even after being released from the life of trees, they would not forget the circumstances under which they had been punished. Therefore, to bestow upon them special favor, Narada Muni arranged things in such a way that after being released, they would be able to see Krishna in Vrindavan and thus revive their dormant bhakti. Purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 10:10, 20-22.
So generally, by the process of evolution through the 8,400,000 species of life, when you take a tree body, gradually, without consciousness, without any endeavor on our part, simply through the process of evolution, you're put into different bodies until finally you reach the beast body, and then from the beast body you're elevated to the human form of life, and not immediately in civilized human form. You have to go through uncivilized forms of humans until gradually you can come to the civilized form and get the opportunity to associate with the devotees. So Narada Muni, he was giving a crash course for these two demigods, that you take birth as trees and you can remember your sinful activities, understand why you've been forced to take birth as trees, and then at the end of that one lifetime, which would last a very long time, because it was 100 years in the duration of the demigods. One day of the demigods equals our 6 months. So they were in that courtyard waiting for Krishna to appear for a very, very long time. They had a lot of time to remember and to repent for all of their sinful activities.
Each day of the demigods in upper planetary system equals 6 months of our measurement. Although the demigods in the upper planetary system are attached to material enjoyment, they are all devotees, and therefore they are called demigods. There are two kinds of persons, namely Devas and the Asuras. Asuras forget their relationship with Krishna, Asuram bhavamashritaha, whereas the Devas do not forget. Tvavbhuta sargau lokesmin daiva asura evacha, daivo vistara shaprokta. Vishnu Bhakta Smrto Daiva Asurastad Viparyaya. Bhagavad-Gita 16.6, also from Padma Puran. Purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 10:10, 20-22. O son of Pritha, in this world there are two kinds of created beings. One is called divine and the other demoniac. I have already explained to you at length the divine qualities. Now hear from me of the demoniac. Bhagavad-Gita 16.6.
So, since time immemorial, because we have to understand that we're all eternal, Krishna is eternal, we're also eternal because we're parts and parcels of Him. No one was created as a demon. Everyone is a devotee of Krishna by constitutional position. That's Dharma, our Sanatan Dharma. But when we turn away from Krishna and choose to come into the material world, due to demoniac association, we develop demoniac qualities, and then we're called Asura. So the Suras and the Suras, they take shelter of the Supreme Lord, and they want to serve the Lord, but simultaneously they try to fulfill their separate material desires. Whereas the Asuras, they have no faith and no respect for the Supreme Lord. They're simply interested in their own sense gratification. So this is the dividing factor. The devotees, they accept and worship the Supreme Lord, and the Asuras, they reject the Supreme Lord and they're only interested in sense gratification.
The distinction between a pure devotee and a karma mishra devotee is this. A pure devotee does not desire anything for material enjoyment, whereas a mixed devotee becomes a devotee to become a first-class enjoyer of this material world. One who is in direct touch with Supreme Personality of Godhead in devotional service remains pure, uncontaminated by material desires. Anya bhilashita shunyam jnana karmadi anavratam bhakti rasamrita sindhu 1.1.11. By karma mishra bhakti, one is elevated to the celestial kingdom. By Jnana Mishra Bhakti, one is able to merge in the Brahman effulgence, and by Yoga Mishra Bhakti, one is able to realize the omnipotency of Supreme Personality of Godhead. Report to Srimad Bhagavatam 10:10, 20-22.
So this definition of bhakti, given by Srila Rupa Goswami in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the words are very important. Anya means any, Abhilash means desires, Sunyam means devoid of. And then karma, jnana, karma, anavritam. That they're completely free of any desires, and their devotional service is also not covered by jnana or karma. So Prabhupada here explains the different types of Mishrit Bhakti. One is Karma Mishra. Karma Mishra, as he explained on the top here, they perform devotional service for elevation so they can get sense gratification. That's the Karma Mishra Bhakta. Then the Jnana Mishra Bhakta, they perform devotional service so they can be elevated to the Brahman platform. And then the Yoga Mishra Bhakta, they perform devotional service so they can get mystic opulences. So this old painting from the original Bhagavad-Gita, it shows here the different types of devotees. And the first one on the left, that's a pure devotee, purely engaged in devotional service, trying to help other people understand Krishna by painting, by any type of devotional service in Krishna consciousness. And then the Yoga Mishra Bhakta, this is the Jnana Mishra. He's interested in merging into the Brahman, understanding the Brahman. And then that's the Jnana. Then the Yoga Mishra Bhakta, he wants the mystic perfections. And then finally, the Karma Mishra Bhakta, he engages in devotional service so he can get some fruits from that. Then pure devotional service is divided into 5 different rasas, the main rasas, and that's where the pure devotees go. They enter into their eternal rasa with Krishna.
But pure bhakti does not depend on karma, jnana or yoga, for it simply consists of loving affairs. The liberation of the bhakta, therefore, which is called not just mukti but vimukti, surpasses the 5 other kinds of liberation: sayujya, sarupya, salokya, sarshti and samipya. Pure devotee always engages in pure service. Anukulyena Krishnanushilanam bhaktiruttama. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 19:167. Taking birth in the upper planetary system as a demigod is a chance to become a further purified devotee and go back home, back to Godhead. Narada Muni indirectly gave Manigrave and Nalakuvar the greatest opportunity by his so-called curse. Report to Srimad Bhagavatam 10:10-20-22.
So the devotee who receives vimukti from the Supreme Lord, the other 5 types of liberation, they may also be awarded to the devotee, though the devotee doesn't ask for them. They might live on the same planet as the Supreme Lord, just like when they come here and display the pastimes in Braj. They might have the same samipya. They live near the Lord. So those forms of liberation, the devotee's not interested in, but they might still have them. But this vimukti, that devotion, that type of liberation, special liberation given to the devotee, means he's only engaged in loving affairs with the Supreme Lord. So that's the type of liberation that the pure devotee aspires for. Then when, for instance, when Jayananda left his body, Prabhupada wrote a letter to him that I'm sure you've gone back to Godhead, but in case you had any tinge of material desire, then for thousands of years you would go to the higher planets and enjoy there, and then go back to Godhead. So while going back to Godhead, you're passing through and seeing all these heavenly planets, and sometimes you develop a desire to visit these places. And then from there, you progress further back to the spiritual world. So this does happen sometimes to devotees, but ultimately the devotee only aspires for the loving affairs with Krishna, which is vimukti. Hare Krishna.